Hi students, welcome back to JA Finance Park. We're in the middle of your debit and credit unit, and today we're talking a little bit about lesson 2, personal shopping, and some good habits or maybe just tips as you approach debit cards and credit cards. I've got a guest with me this morning, so would you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about the company that you work for, your role.
Yes. Hi, I'm Paige Bigham. I work for a consulting company, which means we go in and help other companies navigate big changes that they've never experienced before. So because we've done this with a few other companies, we can come in and really offer some short-term consulting advice and project management to make sure that project is successful.
Great. So Paige, as students are thinking about how they pay for goods and services, what are some of the actual methods that they can pay for those things with?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways, especially with all the different technologies around these days. But I mean, cash, check, credit card are kind of your classic ways of payment, but now there's Venmo and PayPal and Apple Pay and touchless payments and email where you just click a button and it takes you to where you type in your credit card, so you don't even need a physical card anymore.
So which method of payment would you say you use the most often?
I would say right now I use credit card the most often and Venmo. It's just so easy to pay friends with an easy app on your phone. And in stores, just the sort of without a transaction, just putting your card in the machine and paying that way is probably the easiest that I use right now.
And something like Venmo is really connected to your checking account. And so as you use it, it's essentially like, let's say you and your friends go out for coffee and somebody pays for it, instead of giving them a $5 bill in cash or writing them a $5 check, you just hit the Venmo and it automatically transfers out of your checking account.
That's right.
Way to do it electronically.
Yes.
Very cool. Which method would you say you use the least of all of these?
I would say I use checks the least. A few years ago when I was buying a house, they asked for a check up front as one of the first payments, and I didn't have one. So I had to go to the bank and ask for a personal check that way. So,
right. They're still important to know how to do, but you're right. As technology has increased, we don't use some of those paper forms of payment anymore. And even with checks, some of it can be electronic. So, certain payments that I make on a monthly basis are now done by e-check, where when I set up the account, have set up with my bank number, my routing number, or the account number, and it just automatically comes out instead of me having to physically write a check and put it in the mail each month, because I don't really have time to go to the post office, but I do want to make sure that those bills get paid on time.
absolutely agree.
One popular method of payment that we talked a little bit about earlier, we mentioned, is a debit card, which looks a lot like a credit card, but it acts differently. So tell the students, what does a debit card do that can be helpful or that they should know about before they start using one?
Sure. So, yeah, as you said, the debit card looks just like a credit card, but it acts like a check. So the money that you're spending is coming out of your checking account, and it's processed faster than a check would be.
Good. I think one thing students get a little bit weary about with debit cards is you've got to make sure that you have money in your account. It's like a check. If you were to write a check and you don't have enough money in that account, the check could bounce. The debit card, you might have what's called overdraft fees. And so you want to make sure that you've got money in the account as you're using it. But the bank does also provide some protections in case something were to happen fraudulent with your debit card, which is nice when you think about how frequently you might use it.
That's right. I was actually going on a road trip a few weeks ago, and I paid for gas in several different cities in one day, and they texted me and said, "Was this you?" Just to make sure that there wasn't somebody driving across the country with my credit card or my debit card. So
great. All right, so Paige, we just talked about debit cards, but then we also want to make sure we inform the students about credit cards, which are very popular and can be helpful, but also have their disadvantages. So what would you say are some of the advantages of having a credit card versus a debit card?
So some advantages of a credit card is that it is a buy now, pay later scenario. So you may not have enough money in your account at the time to pay for something, whether it's a medical bill or a vacation or a lot of Christmas presents at one time. So you can buy those on a credit card and be able to pay that off later as you go.
It's great, and that's a good transition to talk really about one of the disadvantages of a credit card. Is that credit cards often charge a higher interest rate.
That's
so
right.
In order to help your credit score and to not be paying a lot more than what you've charged, Students, you want to make sure that you pay off that balance each month in full. So one of the ways financial institutions make their money is on interest rates, just like they do with overdraft fees for those debit cards. Interest rates for credit cards are going to be similar. So can you give us an example of a time when you were not able to pay for a good or service using a debit or credit card, when you had to use cash or check?
Yeah, a couple of examples. So a lot of small businesses oftentimes will put a minimum spend in order to use a credit card. So I was just shopping one day and the minimum spend was $50, but I only had about $20 of things to buy, and so I had to use cash instead of a credit card in that instance. Also, when I was buying my home, you can't put a down payment on a credit card because they want to know that you actually have that money to invest in the house. That was another time when I couldn't use a credit card to make one of those purchases. I've also seen in some online donation forms where you can opt to pay the processing fee for your donation, which I think is a great thing to remember, that no matter what the business is, they're having to pay those processing fees.
Yeah, very true, especially for nonprofits, because they're trying to bring money in through donations. That's how they survive as an organization, and every little bit helps. So if the giver is essentially covering the processing fee, that can help. It would be a lot different if they were in person, could just give a $100 bill, but by doing the $100, instead of it deducting down to $96 or $97, they still get that $100. Processing fee is covered. Great example. Thank you, students, for joining us today. As you move forward and think about which type of payments are best for you, hopefully you will use a variety that are both safe and secure and also help you manage your money wisely as you go forward in your careers.